Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh. Joining me this hour from Israel is Haviv Gur, senior analyst for the Times of Israel. He's the host of the must-listen-to podcast, Ask Haviv Anything. I urge you to like and follow it, become smart. Haviv, welcome. How have you been, and how was Martha's Vineyard? It was news to me that there was a Chabad on Martha's Vineyard.
It's fairly recent. It's only 4 years there, but it's a vibrant, exciting community, and I gave a talk there and did a podcast episode. And just also, as of last week, Middle East analyst at the Free Press. Important to say they're wonderful.
Oh, yes. I'm very thrilled with that when I saw Barry posted that. So congratulations. They need that. So I will put that in future introduction. Haviv, I want to start with this question. Do you know the Pod Save America bros?
Yes. Tommy Viter's name is something we're familiar with in the Middle East, and I heard the clip.
Okay, well, let's play the clip for the audience because I want to get your reactions to this clip. For the benefit of those, including my new audience down in Nags Head in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, which we added yesterday, I want you to know the Pod Save bros were what Hunter Biden called junior speechwriters in the Obama administration. They did invent kind of the format of podcasts, but they may have been eclipsed by about 100 other podcasts now, but they are definitely being eclipsed by the Ruthless podcast. Here's what they had to say about Israel yesterday.
And I don't think Democratic candidates should take money from AIPAC or vote to fund military support for Israel anymore. I really don't. This government, absolutely not. And that especially includes, I think, the next Democratic nominee for president.
Things I want to see Democrats at least calling for is cutting off military assistance to Israel. Yep. It's a rich country, by the way. They don't need our $3 billion a year. And hands up, right? Barack Obama signed a 10-year MOU for $3.3 billion a year. So we're part of the problem here. Mm-hmm. Let's correct it. I would like to see talk about sanctioning Israeli government officials who use genocidal rhetoric or who talk about ethnic cleansing openly. We should support a ceasefire resolution at the UN. We should demand that international press be allowed into the Gaza Strip to report on what's happening without an IDF minder. It's insane. The press still can't go into Gaza and cover what's happening. And I also think there has to be a total mindset change in the Democratic Party. When the war ends, we are not going back to the pre-October 7th status quo because it's not where the party is. It's not where the world is. We're not going to shovel billions a year in military aid. We're not going to veto every effort to recognize a Palestinian state at the UN. We should not take money from AIPAC. And I will hold out hope for better political leadership in the U.S. and in Israel. But we have to also recognize that the Biden era Hug Bibi Netanyahu strategy has to be thrown in the trash can forever. Netanyahu is a bad actor. He's continuing a war for political purposes. He bombs Lebanon when he wants to. He bombs Iran when he wants to. He bombs Syria when he wants to. This is not a partner we can count on. This is not someone who is leading to calm and stability in the region, which should be a core interest.
At this point, cutting off military funding for a government that is starving 2 million people and advertising how they're ethnically cleansing the Palestinians seems like the least we can do.
Especially if we're going to head into a primary, table stakes is going to be no more military aid for Israel. So there will have to be a shift. And I do think that will mean putting far more pressure on Israel. And that's what I think Democrats want. By the way, that's what the country wants. And when you poll Israelis, they say they want a ceasefire. Israelis want the hostages returned through a negotiated settlement. And by the way, that's the way in which the vast majority of hostages who were returned were able to be returned.
So, Haviv, ready to go your reaction?
Well, gee, there's a lot there. Military aid. Let's tackle that. That's the only actionable thing. The starving 2 million people. There's real hunger in Gaza. It is not starvation, and it is already being reversed. And tremendous amounts of aid went in and could not be distributed. And I think the Israeli government and military and pieces of the Israeli military that are the opposite of the kinds of political forces that those people are complaining about, which I also dislike in the Israeli government, but nevertheless, they also screwed this up. And so there's a really complex problem of how you deny Hamas the kind of control of aid that it had and still not reach the point we have reached. I think this is a major strategic failure for the Israelis, but nobody is systematically or willfully starving 2 million people. And in fact, 2 million people are not going to starve. And the current hunger is real. I've been talking about it for a month, talking to Israelis about it, raising a stink about it. And thank God that the actions are being taken now that will reverse it and prevent anything bad from happening, anything systemically, dramatically, massively bad. So, they're running on talking points that they heard in basically a kind of media environment that is basically a bunch of information ops. In other words, Gazans are suffering. Gazans are absolutely suffering. And for some reason, the New York Times still feels like it has to lie about it. In other words, they are suffering. But the emaciated child that the New York Times put on the front page as a kind of Catholic pieta to show that the all of humanity was on the stake and the Israelis were Pontius Pilate, that kind of imagery is utterly unrepresentative. Next to this child who is horrifically ill, but next to him is a perfectly healthy child, and that perfectly healthy, and they didn't mention that this child had other health problems, and therefore that this is not representative of the starvation in Gaza. And the tragedy is that there are 150,000 dead and 2 million people in a far greater state of hunger and almost starvation in a place called Sudan that the New York Times doesn't bother with at all. In other words, it's faking a Sudan scale famine where there isn't one. And anyway, they're lying to you even when they don't have to, because they could report on the actual suffering of Gazans. It's a war. You should, if you want to oppose the war, you should oppose wars generally. I happen to think there's a problem with Hamas. You don't have to listen to me. But they're still lying to you, even though Gazans are. So all of that stuff, I ignore. I ignore it because it's untrue, and there's nothing I can do with it. I can't stand and, turn my pockets out and ask them to know the truth when they don't want to. The main thing.
Well, I don't lose any sleep
there,
over them, Haviv, because they represent a fringe within a Democratic Party that is historically ranked at the lowest level it has been at, 15% approval, 8% very supportive. Those guys are part of the 8%, and their talking points are AI generated from the left wing of the party, and I doubt any of them, or collectively, they could get a pass grade on a pass-fail exam of Middle Eastern history, much less Israeli history. I played it for you because it is representative of the punching bag that Israel has become in the American political left. Does that alarm you?
It doesn't. It doesn't. He had a good point. I think that was Viter. We're a rich country. We got rich by being a smart country and being a country that invests in R&D, I think, per capita more than anyone on earth. And we have good policies and we have thoughtful leadership. And that's been true for the last 7 prime ministers, not just this one. We have universal health care. We have a very high life expectancy. You want to withhold that aid, fine. One of the reasons that America started helping Israel strategically and militarily was to actually hold Israel back and calm the Middle East. Because Israel has enemies that will destroy their own polities to go to war with Israel. Iran has spent hundreds of billions of dollars and basically shattered its economy for 25 years in a bid to destroy Israel, which is an entirely religious vision that makes no sense because Iran has absolutely no interest in Israel, no border with Israel. The same is true of, Netanyahu bombs Iran, bombs Lebanon, as if he's just randomly bombing things. These are organizations, these are regimes that have told us they will murder every last one of us for 30 years. And we've built up for 15 years. We spent like a quarter of our economy developing the capability to take out their capabilities. And we did it, and it was astonishingly competent. And thank God we did it. And by the way, that American aid, you co-own so much of what we invent. If you were to give $600 million right now to the American defense industry, they're too consolidated. There are too few actual defense contractors in America to actually be innovative and competitive. And so the Pentagon has this habit of side-skirting unbelievable American red tape and waste and just handing the Israelis a few $100 million, and then America co-owns Iron Dome. And nobody in America would have invented it because they didn't believe it was possible. So, you want to assume everyone in the Pentagon is an idiot. You want to assume every president since Kennedy who has believed in a military alliance with Israel is a moron. You can assume that. And by the way, if you take it all away, what do you think? We're not going to fight Hezbollah? You think Iran is not going to fight?
I'm baiting you a little bit, only because these guys are never going to win the spelling bee. They are deeply emotionally invested in the GACPOA. They're part of Team Obama that got shown to be completely foolish. And they really liked the Iranian deal, and they're very upset that Israel, with Donald Trump delivering the knockout punch, destroyed the Iranian nuclear pretend man and exposed them as a papier-mâché tiger. And they're very, very upset about that. But I wanted to, the American dialogue is changing, and anti-Semitism in the United States is rising at an alarming rate, and I know you know that. And these guys are kind of the pointy edge of the left wing. They're never going to be significant beyond their little podcast, but they are representative. You can be significant. You can be representative without being significant, and they are representative of that part. If the Democratic Party runs on that, my party, I'm a Republican, will be president, holding the presidency for the next 25 years if they run on that. I got to take a break, then we'll come back and talk about the complexities of Gaza. I want to remind my audience, all yesterday I spoke about Gaza. The basic facts, it's 140 square miles. There are 250,000 structures within it, and there are 20 living Israeli hostages hidden by 15 to 20,000 terrorists still left alive, holding the rest of the 2.1 million people captive. There is no famine. There is a food issue. It is being relieved, and we always want to repeat the facts. I'll be right back with Haviv Rettig-Gur, who you ought to follow on X at Haviv Rettig-Gur, talking just about Gaza today for the rest of this hour. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. My guest this hour is Haviv Rettig-Gur, one of the key analysts for the next 30 or 40 years in Israel about Israeli politics, and he comes to America frequently, and he is very eloquent and very smart. Haviv, I wanted to focus on Gaza, not Netanyahu, not the opposition, not the coalition, nothing like that. Your crazy attorney general, nothing, just Gaza. And I gave the facts as we were going out. What do you think the options are on the table, and which one do you recommend, or do you hope to see the Israeli cabinet take? Annexation, occupation, declare victory and leave, or continue the current slow grinding operation to remove the last 15,000 Hamas terrorists?
The ideal is separation. I mean, the ideal is to get the hell out. It's deeply costly for Israel. It's profoundly damaging for Gazans. It's a war, and obviously ending it and pulling out would be the ideal. We can't leave Hamas in Gaza. I don't even say that as a recommendation for policy. If we leave Hamas in Gaza, nobody can rebuild Gaza. If we leave Hamas in Gaza, Palestinians will suffer more, and there'll be another war in 5 years. Hamas has only done one thing in 40 years. We can't assume that 5 years from now it'll be doing something different. This actually has to end with the removal of Hamas, and then Gaza has a new day and a new dawn. And if without it, Gaza doesn't have that new day and new dawn, even without considering the Israelis. It's just literally who Hamas is. And so my recommendation, my frankly frustration with the Israeli government has been with the Israeli war effort in Gaza, which contrasts so much to the unbelievable competence we saw in Iran and in Lebanon. In Gaza, we have not seen that competence. We basically have three wars. We have a ground war in Gaza, and we have a humanitarian war. And what do I mean by humanitarian war? Hamas has been engaged with Israel in a game of chicken. It can handle Gazan suffering, and in a way that Israel can't handle Gazan suffering. I know that runs afoul of the general media consensus in the United States, but in fact, whenever Gazans are hungry, it is Israel that will always blink first. And Hamas will then steal huge amounts of aid and will then use it to sustain its war effort. And Hamas doesn't mind Gazans starving, and the world also will come to Israel with those kinds of expectations and demands. So that humanitarian aid war, to me, Israel hasn't seriously thought through. It keeps trying to come to the brink with Hamas in a thing that Hamas will only possibly win. There's a moral issue here, obviously, but the strategic issue is also not useful. I think we flood Gaza with massive amounts of aid until aid is worthless in Gaza. That's A. And B, there's a third arena besides the ground war, the actual kinetic war and the aid war, which is the information war. I mean, just the massive amount of global attention. Yes, it's rooted in all kinds of crazy Western anti-Semitic kind of paradigms and archetypes in the Western mind. And yes, nobody cares that 150,000 are dead in Sudan. And yes, it's only ever Israelis saying it, so everyone brushes it off. And the poor Sudanese, they wish they were fighting a war with Israel because then somebody would notice. But fact is, there's this massive information war. Now, I genuinely don't care what the world thinks of me. I'm an Israeli Jew. We emptied out of 3 continents to build Israel because we no longer trust in the moral standing of the rest of the world. So I do not care what the rest of the world thinks of me. I don't think the rest of the world knows enough, and I think it's running these morality plays in its head out of deep ignorance. However, Hamas is sustained, and its war effort is sustained by this global discourse that favors Hamas, not just the Palestinian side, Hamas. For example, the British Prime Minister, in his wisdom, has just declared that he will recognize a Palestinian state if Israel doesn't agree to a ceasefire by September, a ceasefire that Israel has already agreed to and which Hamas has rejected just 2 weeks ago. What? He's actually offering Hamas recognition for the Palestinian state in exchange for, and pressuring Israel to then agree to something. Hamas just has to sit tight, and Britain will come forward and give Hamas recognition for rejecting a ceasefire. So, the world is very silly, but this silliness sustains the Hamas effort and gives Hamas the ability to argue in the Arab world and Arab media that it is somehow winning. We need to be.
I'm going to come back to the UK, but I want to go back to the kinetic war, because I can't get over the fact that Gaza is denser than Manhattan and Hong Kong, and that there are 20 Israelis there, that the kinetic war has got to get it back before they go and try and kill the 15,000. Does Israel have to abandon the 20 people, Haviv? Because that which gets rewarded gets repeated. We're going to see a lot of Israelis taken hostage around the world now, I think, given the value that Israel is putting on the last 20. To win kinetically, don't they really have to at least risk the lives of those 20?
Hamas can't survive this in Gaza. That's not a thing that can happen. Our people are sacred to us. The idea that we defend each other, that solidarity is fundamental to who we are, because we're the last, because 90% of us are the grandchildren of refugees, because we're the last living Jews in the Eastern Hemisphere, mostly, generally. That's generally the historical experience. So we have therefore been willing to pay any cost to get our hostages back in the past. And we have taught our enemies, we have trained them to understand that they should take our hostages, because then they have strategic leverage over us. And so right now, what we have to do, and I am in a minority of Israelis when I say this, and I say this with great trepidation and fear and shaking hands, we have to go after Hamas as if there are no hostages, and go after those hostages with everything we have, every intelligence asset, every commando asset, to try and rescue them. But we have taught our enemies to take those hostages, and now we have to teach our enemies that it is catastrophic to take our hostages. We have to teach them the opposite lesson.
That is clarity. It's strategic clarity. I also think it's moral clarity. I'll be right back with Haviv Rettig-Gur. Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back with a lot more of Haviv. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Haviv Rettig-Gur is my guest this hour. Haviv, you mentioned Keir Starmer. We can add Macron to this collection of left-wing morons, and I really do think they're morons. President Trump got asked about this on Air Force One last night, flying back from Great Britain. Here's what the president said.
Is there any use at all in pressuring Israel now to come to some sort of longer-term solution?
Well, you could make the case that you're rewarding people, that, you're rewarding Hamas if you do that. And I don't think they should be rewarded. So I'm not in that camp, to be honest. We'll let you know where we are, but I am not in that camp.
Mr. President,
because if you do that, you really are rewarding Hamas. And I'm not about to do that.
So Haviv Rettig-Gur, the president and you share this opinion. This is fundamental, like geopolitics. It's not really quadratic equation geopolitics. It's fundamental. It's 2 + 2. They get that which gets rewarded gets repeated. They will attack again and again and again. Does anyone not understand this and they just are ignoring it, or do they not understand it?
I'll say more than that. Yeah, it's so blitheringly obvious that it really is astonishing how utterly just out to lunch these people are. I'll just say one more thing. Hamas is doing this to them. Hamas is doing this to Macron. Hamas is doing this to Keir Starmer. Hamas is saying this is an all or nothing war, and the only way to support Palestinians is to support Hamas. And they're falling for it. Imagine for a moment that you're Keir Starmer. Your heart goes out to Gaza, and your backbench is rebelling against you over Gaza. Wouldn't it be great if you could support Gaza without incentivizing Hamas to actually continue the war and brutalize Gazans as well as Israelis more, forevermore, and to claim they're winning something fundamental? Wouldn't it be great if you could support Gazans without that? Well, that's exactly the story of Hamas. There is nothing that these people can do for Hamas that Hamas won't undo. Can do for Gaza that Hamas won't undo. They will try to support Gaza, and Hamas will use it to destroy Gaza. They will try to send aid to Gaza. Hamas will use it to make sure that that aid doesn't actually help rebuild Gaza. They will try all the moral things, and Hamas will ruin it for them. And they're not going to figure it out now. They'll figure it out in a year or in 2 or in 5. If we get rid of Hamas, Keir Starmer's moral emotions will maybe actually matter. Until then, all he's doing is telling Hamas, keep it up.
Haviv, I think you're kind of right smack in the center of Israeli politics, as far as I can tell. I really don't know if you're kind of a little bit Likud or maybe a little bit. I don't. You're right, but you're definitely not hardcore right and conservative. Do you think that the people in France and Macron and Starmer, they're far left? Do you think they're doing it for political reasons, that they're just satisfying a Muslim vote in their countries or their backbenchers? or are they actually doing it for moral reasons and they just don't understand?
I mean, the way it works with politicians is that they genuinely believe that they are doing the thing that happens to fit their politics out of deep, principled concern. And I have covered politicians for 20 years, and it's an amazing thing how the thing that works for them politically is also the thing they have always believed anyway. And by the way, they're not lying. They both think that they're important to the leadership of the country, and so what advances them is inherently important to the country. But also, they genuinely, think that these things are equal or the same. So I don't know. My impression of these two, for example, Netanyahu thinks that he can do anything he needs to stay in power because he's the man who will save Israel and the Iranian nuclear program. He genuinely believes it, and he's lived his life that way. With Macron and Starmer, I can't help feeling from watching from the outside, and forgive me to the French and the British for commenting from the outside, that they're cowards. They're just deep cowards. There are no real serious, courageous policies on the rise of Islamic law as legal institutions in their countries, on all kinds of social problems, all kinds of poverty problems. Israelis, with all the problems Israel faces, Israelis are richer per capita than the British today. Britain is a country in a kind of slow-moving free fall, and nobody's even brave enough in the British leadership that I have seen, and again, I'm watching from outside, to even talk about it seriously. And so you have all of these enormous problems in their country. Why does he have time for Gaza? And that's a question. So to me, that's fascinating. I think he's actually a coward, both on real problems that the British face and also on Gaza. You want to smack Israel around and pressure Israel to have a different policy toward the Palestinians? Get rid of Hamas, because Hamas keeps telling Israelis they're going to come for their kids and murder them till the end of time. Hamas is neutralizing Macron's and Starmer's ability to actually influence Israelis, and they don't grasp that, and so they just keep playing into Hamas's game. It's cowardice, it isn't morality, and I don't respect it.
I doubt anyone in Israel does. You got a couple of far left organizations that agree with them. Michael Oren set me straight about how far left and wacky they are. Welcome back, America. Haviv Reddy Gur is my guest. You can listen to him whenever he posts at Ask Haviv Anything. He also does occasional podcasts and reporting over at Times of Israel and for the Free Press. Haviv, I want to switch to the north a little bit. Your episode on the Druze was eye-opening for me. I didn't know anything. Oh, I knew a little bit the Druze were in Israel and they were in Lebanon. I didn't know they were mostly in Syria, and I didn't know what was going on there. There's been a massacre there and a bloodbath there. Not many people know what's happening. I would recommend that they go back 3 or 4 episodes and ask Haviv anything and have Haviv talk to the Druze Israeli who spoke so passionately. She was a fabulous guest. Has it stabilized, and do you think Israel has sent a message that Jolani will respect, which is stay away from the Druze?
Not enough. I don't know that Israel handled that incident well. I think we've handled a great many of the problems in our region extraordinarily brilliantly, but both Gaza and on this question of southern Syria, I think there was a little bit of a worse kind of strategic thinking. The Druze are divided in Syria. There's a little more complex. That episode was an hour. We talked a lot about who the Druze are, their religion, their history, their connection to Jews over a long period of time. But the Druze are nevertheless in Syria divided into different factions. There's a lot more complexity there. And there's a lot of people around the world who want Jolani to bring stability by imposing himself on as many parts of Syria as possible. For example, the Trump administration, if I were in the Trump administration, that would not be an unreasonable policy, but it actually flies in the face of what the Israelis need from Syria, which is a buffer zone pushing off a future potentially Turkish adversary that is essentially taking over Syria as a client state. And the defense of the Druze. The defense of the Druze is fundamental to Israeli policy in the north, and keeping that Syrian border from ever being militarized again in the way Iran was trying to militarize it with Hezbollah opening, divisions on the Syrian Golan. So all of those complicated things all put together is to say, I'm not sure Israel got what it needed. It bombed Syria's government, literally, headquarters in Damascus, to stop the Bedouin Sunni militias and government forces from attacking the Druze. A massacre went ahead anyway. And and other Druze wanted the Druze of Sweda to stop the fighting because they wanted to be part of the unified Syria, so to speak. So it's a mess. It's a mess. I do think it's a good thing that Israel flew the flag of defending the Druze. That was something that we owe morally to the Druze. And I think it's politically good for us to show that we back an ally. But I don't know if the situation there will stabilize over the medium term and be safe for them.
All right, now I want to return to the kinetic effort to end Hamas. 15,000 fighters. The Israeli war dead since 10/7, I believe, is at 488 and maybe closer to 500. I don't know every incident that's happened in the last week. Is that Vietnam, and is there an option where overwhelming force... I agree with you. Flood the zone so that food loses its value. That is actually a strategically viable option. If there's so much food, Hamas can't sell it. They won't have any money. But if you can't have a Vietnam, which it looks like right now, do you have enough troops to actually go into the areas in this urban jungle and eradicate the 15,000, kill them all?
Yes. The question is at what cost? At what cost for Gaza? At what cost for Israel? There are the amount of troops. There's the ammunition. I don't know what the things you need. The hostages will probably be lost. And more than that, when you do that, you need to replace it with something. In other words, if you do go in and demolish that last areas that they're actually in, the IDF controls about 75% of the ground in Gaza. There's 25% of the ground it doesn't control, including the urban areas where Hamas remains deeply ensconced, and there are gun battles underway now. In other words, there's different pieces of Gaza where there are different Israeli military forces fighting various guerrilla groups of Hamas. So it can be done, but the question is, at what cost, and if that's really the smartest way to move forward.
So what is the limit that Israel can endure? It's been 2 years. 488 times 30 is what the casualty count would be in the United States. We could not do that anymore. It's far and more on a per rata basis of casualty KIA than we suffered in Iraq or Afghanistan. How much suffering can Israel bear with these young men? And I read every obit that the Times of Israel puts up. They're all 18, 19, 20. There are a few master sergeants, but it's awful.
I mean, it's not Vietnam. It's not Vietnam in the sense that it isn't very far away. And it isn't believed by the Israeli populace to be, ignorable and avoidable, and ultimately just a kind of Vietnam was a war fought essentially over an international relations theory, the domino theory and communist expansion. And it might have been a good theory. And by the way, where the American troops did stop the Soviet advance, Korea, for example, those countries flourished, and they're free today because of it. And so it wasn't necessarily a bad theory, but it was very, very abstract and theoretical. There's nothing theoretical about Hamas. Nothing at all. Hamas is a vengeful, vindictive enemy that will brutalize everyone under its power, and it will brutalize the Israelis for all time. And Hamas has told the Palestinians, as a matter of fundamental principle, it's an all or nothing war. It doesn't want a peace. It has bombed every peace process we've had in the 40 years since it was founded in 1987. And it believes that only one people are allowed to survive this. And they're creating a zero-sum conflict, demanding a zero-sum conflict. So we have an implacable enemy that's willing to see the destruction of its own polity in order to destroy us because of a grand religious vision. And it's right next door, and it will find any hole in our defenses and come through it at all times, irrespective of the damage caused to themselves and their people. That's not a Vietnam. That is not something that will ever let
There's
up
also
on. That's the tragedy.
There's also a half dozen members of the Politburo in Qatar. Should they be eliminated regardless of what Qatar thinks and the United States thinks and everyone else thinks? I know that Qatar has been operating as the middleman for a long time. 30 seconds to the break. Should Israel just serve notice they can leave or they'll be dead?
Yeah, 22 months ago. I don't know why they're alive. Nothing Hamas should be alive.
All right. I'll be right back for my final segment with Haviv. We talk about the strategic relationship between the United States and Israel. For my new listeners, I've always said I'm not a Jew. I'm not got no investment in Israel other than the fact that they are the strategic equal of any of our allies. And I think right now they are our most important ally in the world. And the United States ought to know that, even if the left wing of the Democratic Party doesn't, Donald Trump does. I'll be right back with Haviv for the final segment right after this. Welcome back, America. I hope you listen to Haviv Rettig-Gur, his Ask Haviv Anything podcast. I hope you follow him at the Free Press. I hope you read him in the Times of Israel. Haviv, you got 3 minutes here. What do you want Americans, not Jewish Americans, but Americans generally to know about this conflict? If we clip 3 minutes and you get 3 minutes of their attention, what do you want them to know?
A lot of what people are telling you is right. A lot of what people are telling you is wrong. It's a propaganda war. It's a big part of the war. You are subject to it. I apologize for that. It's not fair to you. The fundamental thing to know: you are allowed to criticize Israel. You're allowed to come to Israel with demands. There's military rule over the Palestinians that I voted multiple times to end, and many Israelis did, including right-wingers. But every time there was always this element of Palestinian politics that came swooping in to mass murder children, 140 suicide bombings in the Second Intifada. Every time Israeli politics' decision to move forward in that direction was shut down by the Hamas and Hamas-like entities on that side. Not all Palestinians, not every Palestinian. I work with Palestinians, I talk to Palestinians. There's a huge diversity in Palestinian views, but that part of Palestinian society. Your critique of Israel will matter as soon as Hamas is gone. You cannot have in the world a world that comes to the Israelis and says, you got to pull out, you got to stop fighting, you got to have ceasefires, you got to pull out of parts of the West Bank, whatever the demand is. And Hamas saying to them in their other ear, sometimes in actual Hebrew, including last week, we're going to murder your children from everywhere you pull out of. There is nothing you can do for the Palestinians that Hamas won't undo. And so if you're right wing, let's go after Hamas. If you're left wing, geez, you really want to go after Hamas more, because then you can actually be left wing and actually pressure the Israelis the way you want to. If Hamas survives this, Gaza does not wake up to a better day.
And last question, how soon can Israel flood Gaza with enough food so that food loses its value? That's a strategic, that is so important. How long do you think it can take to do that?
I'm hoping it'll take a week. I mean, we could do these complex like aid operations, or we could just take a huge stockpile of army battle rations and dump them on Gaza. I have eaten army battle rations. They're not very tasty, but they are very nutritious. And I think that it's possible to move a lot of material very, very quickly. If you come to the international community and you say, just hand me your emergency, rescue reserves, and let's just dump them on Gaza and we'll replace them for you next month. I don't think that's the kind of thing that'll be impossible. The Prime Minister, by the way, has said that today. He has asked for international help in rushing that aid to Gaza. I think that's a sign of how the Israelis have woken up to how really just totally mistaken and foolish it was to play this game with Hamas.
Haviv Rettig-Gur, follow him on X at Haviv Rettig-Gur. Listen to Ask Haviv Anything. Read him in the Free Press. Of course, that magazine, that online paper is something you ought to be subscribed to anyway. Haviv, thank you. I'll check in with you in a few weeks, and I always appreciate the time.